Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. I'm Dave Turner, along with Pat Pickens. Of course, this week we have a little bit of a somber note to start out with. Longtime NHL and Montreal Canadian legend John Beliveau passed away at the age of 83. Pat, you've seen it, I've seen it. The outpouring of love for this man is incredible, and I think it really speaks to who he was as a person, both on the ice and off. Obviously, we didn't have a chance to see him play, but just from what you hear, what have you learned this week about the great man that was John Beliveau?
Well, it's easy to learn when you don't know much. All I knew basically about Beliveau was that he has a statue, or a statue devoted to him outside of Bell Center. Obviously, the name resonates. The 507 goals, 1,200 plus points, 10-time Stanley Cup champion, a two-time Hart Trophy winner. But what I've learned this week is the personification of class. I reached out to a friend, Stu Hackle, who writes, formerly of the New York Times, currently writes for a variety of news outlets. He wrote an obit that is worth the read for the Hockey News. And his quote to me was, "Beliveau was a truly magnificent player in person. In my mind, the ideal captain and a man of great sophistication. It's safe to say that he was a true role model for everyone in hockey when it came to the way he conducted himself in public, although none ever did it as well as he did." And to say that, I mean, we know hockey players are among the best, people to deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's part of the reason why I got into hockey writing, is because how wonderful hockey players are to deal with one-on-one, how much time and how thoughtful and considerate they are with their time and with their words. But to hear the outpouring where you see, people come out of the woodworks and great former teammates and great former Canadians and great former NHLers just gush over John Beliveau, it makes you realize just what we lost.
Absolutely, and I think it's more than just what he did. He was a winner, of course. I mean, his teams were incredible, but I think it's really everything else he did. He was a man who had charities his whole career. I was actually listening to a really good interview on SiriusXM with Scott Laughlin, and he was interviewing Brian McFarlane. He used to do Hockey Night in Canada. He's been retired since the 90s. So McFarlane saw him play the whole time. And they were sharing stories about him. And the one that really stood out was Laughlin. I'm going to paraphrase here, but Laughlin goes, "Oh, well, if there really was a hockey god, I'm pretty sure he'd create a guy just like Beliveau." And then McFarlane just goes, kind of maybe taken back, really thinking about it, just goes, "And he'd be wearing the C." And it just the way that people, obviously when someone dies, all the good things come out. But it feels like with him, it wasn't forced. It was just like all these things that you could say about him that you didn't wish, hope you were wishing that you'd have to a little bit longer to say, but all of a sudden this guy was unbelievable. Everything he did on and off the ice. Even the Gordie Howe story that I told you before that we'll discuss here, apparently it was something where Howe in his first year went to take a run at him, and he brushes him off and walks away. And Gordie Howe being a little bit of a hothead, I think the quote from Gordie Howe, again I'm paraphrasing here, was something like, "He's unflappable, you can't even stop him," that kind of thing. He was elegance is a word that I've seen passed around a little bit. To me, the fact that he's lying in state right now at Bell Center, I believe as we're recording this, I think he is actually there right now. That's for popes and presidents. I mean, that really says a lot about him, doesn't it?
It also says a lot about the obsessive hockey culture north of the border. But you're right. I mean, to have the captain of, when he played with guys like Richard, he was the captain of 10 Stanley Cup teams, and or 10 seasons in Montreal, he was the captain. And when you consider that, with the just the incredible players that played in that era, it leads you to believe what John Beliveau was as a hockey player.
Absolutely, and if you're an inspiring hockey player or any other sport, that's who you want to be like, no doubt. Moving on now to another captain who certainly has the hearts of Canadians as well. Maybe not the Canadians, but another a little bit in Ontario there, is Daniel Alfredsson. I think that was kind of a little bit weird last night with Alfredsson, with him taking the pregame skate and coming out. I know he's really loved up there, but to me, why don't you just sign the one-day contract and retire? I found that to be a little odd. Well-deserved, of course. What did you think about that last night?
I posed this on Twitter last night that was Halfredson actually a healthy scratch? He would have to be, right? Considering that he was signed and took the warm-up for one day and then took the warm-up, he'd have to be a scratch, correct?
I guess so, yeah.
But no, all joking aside, there was a big to-do about this on social media basically over the weekend when the news leaked that Alfredsson would announce his retirement. And the case was made, the question was whether he's a Hall of Famer. I think this I thought he was a no-brainer. He's 444 goals, 1,100 plus points. He's a 4-time 30-goal scorer. He's almost a point-per-game player over 18 seasons. I mean, most of them were in Ottawa. You have to consider the era in which he played. He started in the mid-'90s when the clutch and grab was so prevalent. He posted 100-plus points the first season in which the clutching and grab in the new NHL, if you will. He took them to the Cup Finals in 2007. He was ornery. He's kind of what Corey Perry was for the last decade, in that he shot pucks at people. He did, kind of silly, dumb, ham-headed things. But, I mean, I think you got a real sense of him watching, or I got a real sense of him watching 24/7 last year when they were featuring the Red Wings in obviously the great HBO documentary where they were talking about the Wings and Leafs, that he's a family guy. He's a kind of a crazy and fun and excitable guy. But at the end of the day, he's a hockey player, one who posted 1,100 plus points in a long career, and I don't think there's any doubt he's a Hall of Famer. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he has to be. To me, numbers are something that you can't obsess over. I get it how it happens in baseball, but to me, you look at numbers, and different eras of the league will give you different numbers. I think you really have. To me, I look at the Hall of Fame as were you a dominant player in your day against the competition you played against. You can't compare guys from other eras because it's just not the same. To me, he was a guy who carried that team, was the best player on that team, brought them to a Cup final. They were in the playoffs almost every year he was there practically. I think he's the kind of guy that if you look at him more of the eye test of what you saw, he was a great player. And the numbers do speak for themselves as well. I think it's a no-brainer that he is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll move from we both agree as a Hall of Famer to a city that used to have a slew of former Hall of Famers that would embarrass the Hall of Fame at this moment in Edmonton. Hey, we both listened to the emergency press conference that Craig McTavish called on Friday. We both kind of heard him not announce anything at said press conference. They're 13 points out of a playoff spot as we stand Friday afternoon and going nowhere. They've lost 11 straight. Dave, what the hell's going on in Edmonton?
I don't think they know. So I think for us to be able to comment on it, I really don't think anyone knows. To me, I look at it and I say, I'm always a believer that you build from the goaltender out, that you need to have the goaltending and the defense. Even if you look at Calgary and Vancouver, teams in their division, they went out and got goaltending, and that's why they're better this year. You look at Edmonton, and I know they've stockpiled all these, quote, good forwards, because I don't even know if that's true anymore. Taylor Hall's a good player. RNH, I think he could be good in the right system. Yakupov, who knows? I mean, look, you put Neil Yakupov on a team like Chicago, maybe he puts up 30 goals and has 65 points or something like that. I just think that they're so far gone. There's no accountability. There's no system in place. They've had new GMs and new coaches. There's no winning is contagious, and so is losing. And I think that once you get into that realm of just every time something goes wrong, it stays wrong. It's contagious, and that's what you're seeing from this team. Is it just snowballs out of control, and I don't think they know how to fix it right now.
The irony of you speaking to the accountability is that Dallas Aikens was basically the accountability master and taskmaster when they brought him in. I mean, he was groomed to be the NHL coach. He was the strict, the cop, the guy. And McTavish said in his press conference that the players are actually starting to hold themselves accountable, and he credited Aikens' staff for that. He said they're seeing growth and that visually they're a better hockey team, but there's not tangible evidence for that improvement, meaning it's difficult to swallow, in particular for the fans who flock to Rexall. I mean, look, is Taylor Hall a gifted hockey player? Of course. Is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins a gifted hockey player? There's no doubt. Is Jordan Eberle the potential superstar player? Is Yakupov? Are all these guys? Yeah. Did they think they had a goalie of the future when Ben Scrivens broke the save record last year? I think they did. But the reality is, this is a bad defensive hockey team. I mean, you look at their goals against right now as it stands. Their goal differential is 50 to 98, minus 32. That differential is second worst in the league, with only Buffalo being worse. 90 goals, only Dallas has allowed more in the entire NHL right now, which, we've already spoken ad nauseum about Dallas's defensive problems. But they got Foss as the backup. They thought Scrivens was the guy for the future. And they have all this offensive talent that they drafted from, having the top 3 picks over and over and over again. If they tank for Connor McDavid, is there any question that, or is there any doubt perhaps that he'll be the superstar franchise player that everyone drew him up to be?
I don't know. I think that, I've actually had this is a really interesting discussion here that we've talked about. Do you have players that could have been Hall of Famers or even very good that have been in the wrong system and never panned out just because they were in the wrong system? Of course, there's the idea that, the cream will always rise to the top, that a great player will be a great player no matter where he goes. I don't know if I buy that. I come from the idea that you could be Sidney Crosby, and if you were on the worst, most horribly managed team, maybe you don't turn into anything because they never put anything around you. They never give you the chance to grow. I don't know if McDavid necessarily can go there and succeed. I would like to think so because, look, he looks like he's the best thing since Sidney Crosby, Steven Stamkos, but I don't know. To me, if I were them, granted they haven't shown that they can draft well, but if I'm Edmonton and I have how many roster holes right now, I would trade him for the next 3 first-round picks and at least hope that maybe eventually with enough picks you can figure it out. Because to me, bringing in another forward for them doesn't really fix anything. Will they score more? Sure. But I think that there's just a lot of issues there that will not get fixed at all just by drafting Connor McDavid if they get so lucky.
The one thing I will say, though, is if they can get a guy like McDavid, then other guys will either become accountable or will become trade pieces. And Nugent-Hopkins, you mentioned him, is probably one of the guys. I mean, McTavish referenced in his press conference Friday that it takes a while for players to pan out, and it truly does. But at the same point, how many years are you going to wait for Nugent-Hopkins to be the leader you want him to be, for Taylor Hall to break, for all of these guys to break out and be the players you want them to be? Plus, you just overspent for another former first-round pick, Benoit Pouliot, who's signed now through 2018-19. I mean, we spoke about it before that draft well, and this was a question that was posed to McTavish also, that they haven't had any guys beyond the first round who have really panned out. When you have to overspend on free agents, and what do? You start signing guys like a third liner like Benoit Pouliot to $20 million over 5 years. That's outrageous.
Exactly. You have to draft well. I don't care what sport it is. if you don't draft well, you're going to overpay for guys because you need to fill the gaps in your roster, and then you don't have control over the RFA years. It changes the culture when you have a good core of you look at Chicago. I know they had their troubles, but they've still been able to keep the right guys and that kind of thing. And you look at even other teams who have been able to do that where they have the young talent. Even looking at like what the Islanders might have coming with some of their younger guys in the next few years, Strome and stuff like that. When you have them in their RFA years, you're in good shape because they can't break the bank. You can give them contracts that maybe overvalue them at the present, but undervalue them 3-4 years down the road. Even kind of like what the Devils did with Adam Henrique, where if he really does turn into a 70-point player, perhaps it almost looks like a steal. And I think that's the thing is when you don't have the basis from your own organization, when you're looking outside of your own organization, you're never going to get the value. You're going to overpay. You're going to get guys who were not signed. And you got to think of also is, look, if these guys are so good, why didn't their team sign them? Obviously, cap issues are part of it, but maybe there's part of that too. That there's a guy like Benoit Pouliot where he wasn't worth $5 million, so they let him walk. I think for the Oilers, they have to look at themselves in the mirror and say we have to make wholesale changes to get better from within.
If you look at the names in their top 9, they're not bad names, though. They're names that should be doing more than this. This is offensively, of course. Defensively, I mean, who knows? You mentioned they had to overpay. I know Pouliot's hurt, but that was a curious move. He was great. He was fine for the Rangers in a third-line, low-paying role. Who knows? I mean, the bad times all around Edmonton. I thought they had turned the corner a couple years ago, and it just regressed. And it's hard to see where an organization goes. I mean, you know how getting to the tournament can gain you so much in terms of, obviously the financial aspect. Obviously, for the Oilers in this case, just getting to the playoffs would calm the Wolves at their door at this moment. I mean, but 8 years ago they were the 8th seed and they went to the Stanley Cup Finals with a team that's far less skilled than this bunch is, and you wonder just what's happening? Like, where do you if that team could get to the 7th game of the Stanley Cup Finals in 2006 and lose to the Hurricanes, a team that I believe they were a 93-point team, the 06 Oilers. How come they can't with the skill and offensive talent they have now?
That's a good question, and I think, and especially because the league is more tailored toward those kind of players right now than it was. If anything, like their team really does fit the mold for what would be or should be a successful team in the NHL in terms of what they have offensively. I really think it comes down to leadership. I really do. To me, I don't think Taylor Hall. Obviously, I'm not in the room, that kind of thing, but I haven't seen it from Taylor Hall where he's really taking that step towards being the superstar that can be the guy they lean on in the room, on the ice, that kind of thing. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, I think could be a really good player in the right spot, but I don't know if it's working for him. Even Jordan Eberle, I mean, I think he's going to be gone because I feel like he could plug into a different system almost better than any of them and just kind of go on his way and get his goals and that kind of thing. I don't know. They're lost. They really are lost, and it's a shame because they're going to be opening up that new building, and between that and then you think of the heyday of the 80s and you think, what the hell happened between then and now? But it is what it is. Eventually, look, the Kansas City Royals made the World Series last year, so anything is possible.
You ready for a little role play?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Dave, let's see who you are this week to start. You are Phil Kessel. You are under siege in the Toronto media because you don't talk to the press, but you still have 13 goals and 27 points, which are good for top 10. Why can't people in Toronto stand you?
I don't know. You know what? If I'm Phil Kessel, I'm going to say one thing. I'm going to say for every point that I have, I can tell you guys I'm not talking. Because right now he wouldn't have to talk much if that's the case. If I'm Phil Kessel, I'm just going out there and living up to my contract, living up to the trade, and doing everything I can for that team. He's been excellent. I think he has one of the best shots in the entire game. I know people love to say that he's overweight and he's not fit. The guy can move a little bit too. Again, if I'm Phil, I'm just gonna do my thing. If it works for him, he's not the issue. If this team doesn't make the playoffs, which who knows if they will or not, unless he goes on some incredible cold streak, which I don't think it looks like that considering how he's played so far, he is not the issue for this team. And the fact that they make it that it's his team and his issue, go talk to Dion Phaneuf a little bit or something like that. Phil Kessel has every right to do what he wants in terms of not talking. Maybe he's a guy who's just afraid of what he might say or that kind of thing, or he just doesn't like to talk. Look, his play on the ice has been excellent. I don't think he has to answer to anyone right now.
I think he's suffering from, you always talk about the market. I mean, if he was in anywhere else, it wouldn't even be an issue right now. You'd have no. And the other thing is, people up there they get bored. I imagine. They have to find things to talk about. And if Phil doesn't want to talk, I don't. I mean, listen, I'm a reporter who goes in dressing rooms, and if a guy doesn't want to talk to me, I don't like it either. But at some point, if I'm a fan of the Maple Leafs, like you said, I mean, that top line with Van Riemsdyk and Bozak, you can certainly do worse than that. And Kessel is not the reason why that team, like you said, if they don't make the playoffs, it's not going to be Phil Kessel's fault.
No. Okay, so Pat, you are one of. I know you witnessed the tirade he had a few weeks ago. You are Ron Hextall, and what do you do now? Obviously, it hasn't been pretty. It seems like it's getting worse. The decor that they send out there every game almost looks like it's getting worse and worse by the day. You're Ron Hextall. What do you do to possibly take this team to the playoffs this year?
I'll be honest. If I'm Ron Hextall, I think I like what happened the other night in Anaheim. And it sounds crazy to say because they lost in a shootout. They lost their 9th consecutive shootout, which, by the way, is the longest active shootout drought in the NHL.
Oh, that's very Devils-like.
Yeah, we got Wayne Simmons to finally score a couple goals. We scraped out a point. We scored late in the game with the goalie pulled in a tough building, in a tough place to win. I mean, sure, we're 2-9-2 on the road. But if I'm Ron Hextall, I'm biding my time. I mean, we don't have any cap space to go make a move, to go get a trade. Unless, we're going to pawn Andrew McDonald off on Edmonton and they're going to give us Jordan Eberle. I mean, what can you do? You're hamstrung. And I'm only in my first year as the general manager of the Flyers. I basically have no pressure on me whatsoever because Paul Holmgren stuck me with all these horrible contracts. I mean, I know how horrible it is to play games at the or in Philadelphia because they booed me incessantly when I was the goalie there. At this point, I'm trying to make a move, but they're stuck in a similar situation as Edmonton, only with less cap space at the moment. So you almost have to just sit tight, hope guys like Matt Reed and Umberger scored a goal in Anaheim the other night. You have to hope that some of those moves start to pan out here. And that, some of your 7 guys who scored 20 goals last year kind of progress back to where they were. So they're lucky they're in a horrible division because I believe they're only 6 points out of the 3rd spot as of Friday afternoon. So are things going bad? Yeah. But is there a glimmer of hope? Sure. Why not, right?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have Claude Giroux on your roster, we know how much he can carry them, and Simmons getting hot too certainly helps. But we'll see. Again, as you said, the fact that the division is weak. Even if they put together 2 good weeks, they could be right back in it. So
I was gonna say, especially if you start to get Simmons going, because the 2 goals he scored the other night, it's a big monkey off his back, and you could just see the weight come off his back there. And Umberger scored. They made that huge move with Hartnell in the offseason to go get Umberger, and he's done nothing. I mean, just if you get any scoring secondarily to your top line, you're going to be better off from the Flyers' perspective because Giroux and Voracek carried them for 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Okay, Pat, I think I know which one's coming next for me.
Shifting to your Ron Hextall's former Atlantic Division rival, Dave, you're Martin Brodeur. You gave up 4 goals and 24 shots in your St. Louis debut on Thursday night. Why should I believe that you still have anything left in the tank?
Well, I don't know if I can even back this up, but I think it was one game. It was his first game that he's played in a long time. You can't go crazy about that yet. If he does this the next game, if he does it 3 games from now, then absolutely you have to think that when Elliott comes back, Brodeur is done. But I don't think you can put too much stock into one game. To me, in one game, anything can be a fluke. Look, if he went out and pitched a shutout last night, it doesn't mean that there was no chance of him giving up 5 goals in the next 4 games. You know what I'm trying to say is that let's wait. Let's wait and see. Again, I think he's done. I do think that he's at the end of the road here because a couple of the goals he gave up were pretty weak last night. And he couldn't make the big save on the breakaway late in the game. But it's a little early to say he's done, even though it looks like the writing is on the wall that Marty should probably head off into the sunset.
Thursday, Doug Armstrong said that he's basically putting forth, or this is basically an audition for the rest of the league to look out for, because basically in so many words saying that he is going to go with Elliott after. Did you see some second goal? I mean, we've seen it because we watched the Devils pretty closely, but that was a bad goal. The first goal he gave up was a horrible rebound. That's the kind of
first 2 were bad.
If you're trying to audition for the rest of the league, I mean, it's basically believed with people in the hockey writing profession that he's finished. He's basically just tarnishing his legacy at this point. And I said this to you off camera, and I kind of want to make this point, just that at the beginning of his career, he got almost not enough credit for being a serviceable goalie in Lemaire's system. He didn't face shots. His defense was incredible. You look at the names playing in front of him. And then he posted, great years, Vezina trophies and playoffs and cup final run just 2 years ago in 2012. And now he's almost getting too much benefit of the doubt just because he won more games than everybody else. He has more shutouts than everybody else. He's Marty Brodeur, for God's sake. But, at some point, I know he's earned the right, supposedly, to go out on his own terms. And that's, it's not for me to say that he should retire, but he should retire.
Yeah, I agree. It's just hard. The thing for me is that when you have young kids who are becoming, there's a lot of young hockey fans now, which is great in itself. But for the kids that didn't see him play in '95 and 2000, and even really not in 2003, they don't know his greatness necessarily. And I think that when you look at him moving forward, that people might remember him as the goalie that failed in St. Louis. Got replaced by Corey Schneider, failed in St. Louis, and that was it, perhaps. Who knows? Chapter isn't written yet. But Pat, moving on, a guy who I like as well, Zemgus Girgensons. He's a Latvian player who was drafted pretty early in 2012. Buffalo seems to really like him. You are Zemgus Girgensons. You are the highest vote. Right now, you have the most votes for the All-Star game. How are you feeling about both your game and the fact that the fans are really showing you some love?
I love my game right now, and I love the fact that my country's showing me some love, since apparently Latvia is the country that's getting behind him for the internet voting for the All-Star game. Look, I have 36 points in my NHL career. I'm 20 years old. This is a little ridiculous, and I know that's the case. That, of all the great superstars on earth, I mean, you look at Sidney Crosby has more points this season than Girgensons has in his entire NHL career. But at the same point, if I'm Girgensons, I'm playing for Ted Nolan, who was my international coach for Latvia. I'm having a good year. We're starting to get hot. Why shouldn't I be an all-star? Why shouldn't I be, the top vote getter for the first 2 weeks of the season? I mean, it's a great story, isn't it?
I agree, and I really like his game. And we were talking about this again before, that to me, again, like what Edmonton doesn't have right now, Girgensons is a guy that can play all 3 zones. He's tough. he's the kind of guy that you're not going to necessarily build around because he's not that kind of player, but he's the guy that once you have the team in place, that he's the really solid piece that some teams wish they had when they're rebuilding. He's the guy who's going to be a second line player, who's or maybe a first. I don't know at this point, but he's the kind of guy who you really are going to like having when you're in the middle of that rebuild, where you know what you're going to get. He's young. He's only going to get better. He's got a little toughness to his game. I like that about him, and I think Buffalo has been playing a lot better because I think they were smart and they decided to go with maybe some of the older, even bringing in a guy like Gianta, just because he's a winner and he's been in the right spot at the right time. I like what they've done, Buffalo, and I think that he is part of that because they found a guy in the draft who came in and he just gives you really solid minutes at every point of the ice.
I can't disagree. I can't say that I've watched him closely. He's second on the team in points. He's up there in shots on the team, and I'll give you that he's a guy you build around for the future. So it's a fun story to have him leading the vote right now.
He's got a great name too.
Yeah, I mean any time a guy's name starts with a Z and get the Gergensen, it's just a fun name to say, isn't it?
It is, and you know what? The funny thing is, I wonder how many people just have no idea how to pronounce it. In fact, I would wonder what the various radio guys and stuff around the league have said about him. I wonder what the Canadian pronunciation of it. I always love the way that they say. I would say Nazem Kadri. It's Kadri, that kind of thing. So I really wonder how his name is pronounced.
I would also like to hear Rick Jenneret just scream his name for the time.
Oh boy!
You want to do a little hot knot?
Yeah, let's do it. Who do you got for your hot team?
My hot, while we're on the subject, let's talk about those Buffalo Sabres. Look, this team is not going to will probably not be a playoff team. And to be fair, I came up with decision Thursday before they got trounced by the Lightning on Thursday night. But, I love, and I've been long a supporter for Ted Nolan. He got blacklisted a little bit. The whole story is out there to read. The whole story's been written about Ted Nolan's struggles to get back in the NHL after he was fired by Buffalo in the mid-90s. But it's Nolan's a teacher. He's a tough guy. He's a hard-nosed guy. And it seems like Buffalo's finally starting to kind of buy in, if you will. They're 6-2 in their last 8 entering Saturday night's game in Sunrise against the Panthers. I like Nolan's prowess. He's coaching the Sabres here. I mean, he's coaching them up here. I mean, you mentioned some of the moves they made this offseason. They brought Molson back. They brought Gianta in. Maybe we're finally starting to see Tyler Myers emerge here a little bit. But more, and Josh Georges, when he's healthy, he gives them stability on the blue line. I think they're starting to get a little bit of they're starting to finally get some consistency in goal with Enroth. I mean, his goals against is awful, but he's .913 is his save percentage, and Neuwirth as the backup has been fine too. Like I said, that number is inflated too because he gave up 5 in Tampa on Thursday night. But in the previous 3 games, against 2 against Montreal and 1 against Tampa, he gave up 5 goals. He faced more than 25 shots in every game. And the Sabres won, 6 of 8. We're not going to get to talk a lot about the red-hot Buffalo Sabres this year, unless we're talking about them being red-hot for the Connor McDavid sweepstakes. But what impressed me most about that loss they had in Tampa on Thursday night was they got pushed around, and then they fought back a little. You might have heard about all the penalty minutes and all the fights and things like that. But they're seems like they're playing for each other and they're playing for their coach, and they have the same number of points as of Friday as the Flyers, a playoff team from last year. Like I said, not going to be a playoff team this year. Probably more likely for the McDavid sweepstakes. But we have to give the Sabres some love, especially since they're becoming a little bit tougher to play against than they were in the first couple months.
Yeah, it's actually funny that you bring up the McDavid sweepstakes because I wonder if Buffalo, because I think they've really started to come together, and considering this is year one of the true rebuild, I think they're right where they have to be. I mean, if you draw it up, with realistic expectations for how you develop in a true rebuild, they're right there. My question though is if they continue to win games, do you really want to win 5 more games this year and then maybe not get Connor McDavid? I don't know. I mean, I would hope that they're not going to tank because you want to start building a culture and that kind of thing again. But I really wonder that. But we'll see. Anyway, for me, my hot team is Chicago. I know, of course, you say, oh, Chicago looked a little bit middle of the road for a while. They were teetering, and people were panicking. And I'm just thinking to myself, relax, it's Chicago, they'll be fine. To me, the biggest thing for them of why they're playing well is all of a sudden Brad Richards is playing well again.
Mm-hmm.
He struggled mightily out of the gates. I'm not even sure when he got his first goal. It was a while into the season. All of a sudden now he has 17 points in 25 games. He's +8. And he's looked good. And to me also, Chris Versteeg, who stepped in after Sharp has been down, he has 21 points. He's second on the team behind Patrick Kane. Now, a guy that left, went to Florida, comes back. To me, Chicago might not be quite as deep right now, maybe, as they've been in the past, but they're going to be right there. I know they're not, they're still in third place. They're behind St. Louis and Nashville, but would it really surprise anyone? Or do they even care where they finish as long as they make the playoffs? To me, they look just fine. They've been really playing. So I've watched them quite a bit over the last couple days or a couple games, and they really seem like they're starting to hit their stride.
Hey, you talk about having the best time for a road trip. I mean, they had that. Everyone talked about the circus road trip they went on, to Calgary and to Vancouver and Anaheim and LA, and they won. What did they win? 5 of 6. But they, like you said, they've been on fire basically for the last month. And that line you mentioned, Kane, Versteeg, and Richards centering it. I thought from the minute they signed Richards, that was a perfect fit for them.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is, we kind of stayed around the Richards news just because it was so prevalent here in the area with the Rangers and the buyout, and he's on pace for a similar year point wise, actually maybe a down year from last year. He had 20 goals last year, but I mean, I agree with you, they'll be fine. But it's interesting that Richards is deemed this, this having this renaissance coming of age breakout season, especially like you said, after he was pointless for the first 4 and didn't score his first goal until November 1st. But that the narrative is being driven that Richards is having this, breakout, renaissance year playing with Kane. He's playing with Patrick Kane, by the way.
Yeah, it's not hard to do well when Patrick Kane's on your line.
One of the 2 or 3 most dynamic players on earth here. It's not. I'm pretty sure you could center that line and get 50 points.
Yeah, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but maybe.
But no, but the point. I mean, but you're right. I mean, that they got a little secondary scoring with that second line, and that they actually have a center to play with Kane. Michael Jesus did that for so many years, or at least for last year, and it didn't go well enough. But you said, it's amazing how Patrick Sharp goes down and suddenly they're high flying again.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be there right in the end. Maybe they don't win the division. I don't think that matters to them. Look, they could beat anyone on any given day. Are they really scared of St. Louis? Are they scared of Nashville? I really don't think that's the case.
It's kind of all about them and LA again.
Exactly. Those are the teams, and anyone else is just an also-ran at this point. So, Pat, who is your cold team for this week?
Well, this is going to surprise some people, especially people who have not stayed up late the last week. But my down cold team is the Boston Bruins. I was a little stunned because they've not been playing well really for a couple weeks now. But they held a 4-3 lead in San Jose Thursday night. They had lost 2 straight. Obviously, Anaheim and LA and San Jose, that hellacious road trip. It's really not easy at all to come out of games. And if you look at the Bruins' recent stretch, it really has been tough. I mean, they lost. You might remember they were shut out at home by Carey Price on Hockey Night in Canada a few weeks ago. Since that started a streak in which Boston right now is 1-4-1. They had that loss to Pittsburgh with the disallowed goals a couple weeks back, and now they're on this treacherous California trip where they haven't even picked up a point yet. Like I said, they were up 4-3 Thursday night and gave up 4 straight goals. Rams gave up all the goals, no empty nets or anything. And personally, my response to that was, well, look at who they're playing. Look at who they've lost to: Pittsburgh, Montreal, and then the 3 California teams in California. But apparently, there's some panicking going on in Boston, and when the team loses 3 straight, that's kind of to be expected given the spoiled nature of the fan base. But there is some legitimate concern here, apparently, given that David Krejci, is hurt and hasn't played a lot. Zdeno Chara has missed, I believe it's 16 games this year, and they're having a hard time getting, some production. My thought was that, like I said, they'd be fine, but doing a little digging, with Chara's injury and Krejci's injury is bigger to me because it adversely affects Milan Lucic's scoring, which Lucic had 24 goals last year, and right now he has 5 in 27 games. So it's a big deal. Krejci's obviously the playmaking center that they, he's basically 1-1A with Patrice Bergeron. But you mentioned before Johnny Boychuk's departure, which was basically a salary cap casualty. With Boychuk last year, they had a 22% power play. This year, their power play is firing at about 17%. But also, more so than even just Boychuk, was, from my vantage point, it's organizational hubris. They let Jerome McGinley walk. They didn't have a viable replacement. They figured they would just somehow do it. Like you said with the Blackhawks, that we're the Bruins. We're the best team in the East. We're just going to do it. And I spoke with Matt Kalman, who some of you might know from his work at NHL.com or CBS in Boston, and he said that there's not really any kind of backup option once, or even when Krejci and Chara come back, because they can't make a significant deal without breaking up the core. Peter Chiarelli, the GM of the Bruins, doesn't want to, and they don't have the cap space to go out and get a player. They thought they could replace Iginla from inside, and they found out they were wrong. And basically, that's where the Bruins are at right now. They're the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. They're 2 points up on Florida. They're 3 points up on Washington. I know Krejci's return, like I said, I think that'll get Lucic going. And Chara still is the best defenseman on earth. He's 36 years old, though, so you have to start figuring that him missing time is going to become a thing going forward. And, Rask hasn't really been, I know he's been under siege of late. 2.59 is the goals against, 9.12 is the save percentage. The goals against isn't great. The save percentage is okay. I think they'll be there in the end, but right now there's some trouble looming in Boston.
I agree. They just don't scare me right now, and I think that it might be a situation where their run is sort of at its end. I almost look at them like Vancouver was a couple of years ago, where they still are relevant, but you see the writing on the wall, especially with Chara getting older, where maybe they're going to really need to kind of make some proactive moves if they want to keep themselves in contention for years to come. They certainly have the basis with the Bergerons and Lucic, Krejci, all those guys, but I think they're going to have to add a little bit. For me, I'm going to go with
one last word on the Bruins. Sorry. I think my comparison would be the Red Wings of last year, where they're kind of in that transitional phase. I think they have some expiring contracts, Campbell and Paille and some of those fourth line types. I think they'll be fine after this year, but this might be the year to pounce on the Bruins.
Absolutely. For me, I'm going to go with the Washington Capitals. Not because they've been all that terrible lately. They have won a couple games, but because, I don't know, maybe I've always liked Barry Trotz, and I thought that he'd come in there and do a lot. So far, we haven't seen it. They just seem like a middle-of-the-road team. They right now, as of Friday, they're 11-10-4, which they're right in the thick of it. They're tied for the automatic spot in the Metropolitan Division right now. They're even at goals for and against at 70 apiece. They're 4-5-1 in their last 10. They're the second best power play team in the league, and they're almost dead last in penalty kills. So for me, it almost looks like I know Barry Trotz is the kind of guy that's defense, and I think they are playing a little bit more of a balanced game this year. But I just haven't seen them take that step that I thought that they could take. To me, you look at them and you say there's no reason why they can't be a playoff team, why they can't pass the Rangers perhaps in that division, because the Rangers haven't looked good, the Devils and the Flyers have their issues, and I just haven't seen enough from them. I mean, look, they go out and they beat the Islanders 5-2, and they lose 6-2 the next day to Toronto, and then they lost again to Vancouver after that. To me, this team just seems like they're just meddling in the middle of the road. And when are they going to take that step? They have the offensive talent. Defensively, they definitely got better. But I just don't know if they're going to be able to take that step. And right now, they've looked middle of the pack.
I think there's some. I mean, obviously they have to score goals 5-on-5, and that's always the big question when you talk about Washington the last couple of years. They got a big win last night. Holtby was good in Carolina, but you know, I don't get it really. Is kind of what my response would be when you said, you know, you have the offensive talent that you have Backstrom, you have Ovechkin, you know, these guys are healthy, and then you look at you have the coach and the system that you should and some defensive, you know, improvements over the free agent. You think this should be a team, you know, that should probably run away with that number 3 spot. And yet there they are. They're 2 points up on the Devils at the moment. So, and the teams are going to play each other on Saturday night. So I don't know what to make of Washington. I know this is year 1 of that new regime in Washington. So maybe this is something that they're just got to work the kinks out. But it's a little bit alarming that Washington, you know, the window is slowly closing on this bunch, and they haven't even reached the conference finals.
No, and it's amazing, and I don't want to throw it all on Alexander Ovechkin because that's too easy, because I think that you have to look at the depth that they probably don't quite have. But look, they got better defensively. I mean, Mike Green has actually played better in both ends than he's played in years past. Matt Niskanen is certain, although he's actually -3, go figure. But he's an upgrade certainly over what they had last year. John Carlson is one of the best defensemen in the entire league. So you look at it and you say, all right, where is the real weakness? To me, the one thing that I don't get with them is that they've been so middle of the road. They haven't had any stretches where they've looked terrible. They haven't had any stretches where they've looked really good. And you're thinking, is it eventually going to go one way or the other, or is it going to be the status quo for them? You know, which of course I picked the 2 teams that are going to be in the Winter Classic this year, not on purpose, but just worked out that way. I don't know if this is a team that's actually going to be exciting enough for the Winter Classic, if you even want to say it with them.
Well, their popularity nationally has dwindled of late for some reason. Whether maybe everyone's old hat on Ovechkin, but I think there's some. I don't really think there are concerns there, but like you said, the alarming fact is that they're just middling at this point. Dave, what do you look forward to what are you looking forward to in the next week before we do this all again?
For me, it's a game on Saturday. It's the Chicago Blackhawks at the Nashville Predators, which I don't know, Pat, if you saw earlier in the year. For some reason, I guess because of how big the airports are in Chicago, you can get really cheap flights to Nashville from Chicago. It's been like that for years as Nashville continues to grow their fan base. Chicago fans absolutely invade that building, even to the fact that the Predators had something that if you turned in a jersey of the Blackhawks, you get a free jersey from the Preds. Last time the Predators won, I think they won a 3-2 game. Both of these teams are playing pretty good hockey right now. I can't wait to see what the crowd is like and what we get out of this game, because it should be a fun one.
You get one of those carnival-type atmospheres like when the Rangers play on Long Island. I'll also pick a game on Saturday because Artie Brodeur returns to the greater New York area. I know he's not supposed to start. Jake Allen probably will get the nod on Saturday afternoon on Long Island. But this could be your last opportunity, fans in the metro area, to, watch Marty Brodeur skate in the warm up maybe, or maybe replace Jake Allen if he gets pulled. Plus, the Blues and Islanders is a pretty good game anyway. So Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m. Islanders Blues at the Coliseum. I'm sure there are plenty of good seats available. Just given that the Islanders, despite their improvement, are not drawing as well as many would have liked.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I mean, they have a really exciting team, but yeah, I'm actually working on Saturday, so I can't go. But I was actually thinking of possibly going to that game just to see Marty one more time in uniform. But yeah, obviously he shouldn't play unless the Islanders light up Allen, which of course is possible. Well, Pat, I guess that just about does it. I know one more piece of news, which of course, even when anyone is listening to this might have an outcome, but Damian Brunner has been put on waivers by the Devils. Even though he does have a 2.5 million hit with him, it's only 1 year. You think he signs anywhere, or what do you think is the impetus behind this move?
I actually thought Brunner's game lately has been a lot better. The Devils just have a lot of forwards at the moment, and I think this is the last year of a 2-year deal, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And like I said, I thought his game was better the last couple of nights. I believe he scored a goal last night, and obviously they were shut out in Pittsburgh, but he's been scoring of late. He had some great chances in Pittsburgh. 7 points in 17 games. He's kind of one of those head scratchers when you watch him play. Some days he's active, and some days he's getting chances and around the net, and he has been the last week or so, and some days he's just absent, and he's been a healthy scratch too. I think the Devils are going to starting to get healthy or not sick, which I guess is healthy. And I think Brunner's just kind of a casualty of that. Do you think someone picks him up?
I would think there's someone that should take a chance on him. I do think that out west, I think he could be a nice fit. He does have a game that's a little bit out of control at points, and I think he needs someone to slow him down a little bit. But I think there's definitely a team out west that could put him in their top 9 somewhere, just because he does play that speed game. Hey, why not have Edmonton take a chance on him? I mean, hey, why not at this point?
Yeah, but add one more young forward to that mix.
Yeah, why not?
A winger too, a 28-year-old winger.
Well, Pat, I guess that just about does it for this week with Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. We'll be back next week. Any questions you have in the meantime, hopefully we'll have a little bit more on the Marty Brodeur saga next week. We might find out just where he is at this point, but Twitter questions as well, and we'll be back next week. Pat, have a good one.
You too, Dave. So long, folks.